Welcome to today's virtual career exploration video. I'm Danielle Britton, Talent and Education Director at the Greater Binghamton Chamber of Commerce and the Greater Binghamton Education Outreach Program. Today I'm joined by Rachel Jenks, who is the Chief Brand Boss of the Brand Boss Studio. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Danielle.
We're going to jump right in, and I would love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself. And I know you've said you've had a varied career path, so I'd love to hear about that too.
Sure. So the best way to describe my career path is off the beaten path entirely. Like if you were talking about how to write the trajectory that I've had, I don't think you could even write it. So just a little in a nutshell, I was a professional ballet dancer. I've been a nanny. I've been an office manager. I've done national and international public relations. I was the designer at an international production company. I've worked as a graphic designer, as a marketing director, and I launched my business 4 years ago that just launched a whole new company. So
awesome. So what got you kind of interested in the path that you're on now, from your first company to your now new Brand Boss Studio?
Sure. So looking back over my life, I have always been fascinated by branding. I just didn't always know that's what it was. And so, we would be walking. I can remember being at the mall, with my family, and I'd like stop and stare in a window. And my parents would be like, "Hey, Rachel, we're still walking, keep coming," or so I would drive around and have to remember, eyes on the road, don't be distracted by everything. And what would catch my attention might be a great logo, but moreover, I really know who this company is, if that makes sense. And so I've been really fascinated by that my whole life. And if you look at so the thing about branding, to kind of put it in a little bit more easier to understand terms, what branding does is it builds trust. So branding builds trust with customers, branding builds trust with employees, branding builds trust in the community. That's what branding does. And so if you think about your best friend, you know who they are because you've gotten to know them. And so hey, this is what they're into, and this is how they talk, and this is how I feel when I'm around them, and all those things. And if they show up and they operate in a way, or they behave in a way that's not like that, you're like, wait a minute, what's up with this person? And so it's the same thing for companies. So many companies go around and they're saying this, or they're doing this, or they have this logo over here, or this, or they're just sending all these different messages of who they are, and that ends up breaking trust. And so I think, not to get too personal, but in that aspect of as well, having walked through some times in my life where trust was broken, I think that's one reason why I spot it so easily, where there's an incongruence of somebody not being who I thought they were or who they said they were, whether that's a company or person. So that's maybe getting a little deep, but I feel like I've seen those congruencies and incongruencies my whole life. I just didn't know until I became a professional graphic designer, oh, there's a word for that, it's branding, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about I'm sure it's not always a typical day, but what a day might look like for you, kind of pre-coronavirus, and then we can talk about post.
Sure. So honestly, as far as a typical day, it hasn't changed that much for me. I've been pioneering a virtual office for a while now. I was blessed to have an office at the Kaufman Southern Tier Incubator. I'll plug them. For 2 years, and that's a fabulous, fabulous place to be. Highly recommend for any of you who are starting businesses, go check them out. Amazing resources. But then as my company grew, right, I have a virtual employee. She's not virtual, she's a real human being, but who lives in Corning. And so for us to have an office space didn't really make a lot of sense. And honestly, most of what we do is digital anyway. And so most of my meetings, I do some meetings in person, but most of my meetings are on Zoom calls like this. So I've really been conducting business like this. I kind of have been teasing people. I've been doing business like this since before it was cool. So my day consists a lot of Zoom meetings. So I might have a Zoom meeting with my teammate, Melissa, to go over, okay, let's talk about this project and what's our strategy, and let's kind of check in about this. Or I might be having Zoom meetings to review projects with clients. Or, I just had a wonderful Zoom meeting with a potential client to go over kind of what challenges they're facing and see how we can come alongside and help them in those. So a lot of that goes into my day. I also have a podcast, so recording podcast interviews is part of my day. Editing podcast interviews. I have a YouTube channel, so recording videos is part of my day. Editing, is part of my day. Creating social content for both, my podcast and kind of my personal brand, as well as, our new company brand, all of that. And then, working with content for our clients. So there's no such thing as a typical day. Pre-coronavirus, I was also doing a lot of travel. And so I was doing travel and speaking and, meeting with customers in person, all over the country. So not post, or I guess during coronavirus, that's all happening virtually, all on Zoom calls. And so I think even post-coronavirus, I will definitely be traveling, but I think even as far as interacting with clients, I think a lot more will be like this, because this is a side note and you can edit this out if you want, but I just feel like people are getting used to doing business this way.
Yeah.
And in some ways it makes us a lot more efficient. There's that meme about like, hey, this meeting could have been an email. And I think that people are really seeing the value of meeting virtually like this. So I think that while the world has kind of shifted into this, I think it's going to shift things for us as a company even moving forward.
Great. Being an entrepreneur, I imagine you don't have like a typical, obviously 9 to 5 job. Do you find you work all the time, or especially starting a new brand and everything?
Yes, especially starting a new brand. We built everything ourselves, our own website. That was our first time. One of the things that I have great respect for is we have some amazing, like Chef Freshie sites. We have some amazing website designers and providers in our area, and I'm not trying to do what they do. I'm not like, they're rocking that, let them rock that. I'm not trying to be like anybody else. I'm just going to be me. I'm just going to be Rachel. I'm going to be the brand boss. That's how we're going to show up. That's how I can best serve people. So, but when it came to launching our own company, it did make sense for us to build that ourselves. So there was a big learning curve. And just to everybody watching this, there will be projects that you take on whatever career that you do, that you're going to figure out as you go. Like Danielle, you and I were just talking about how you're teaching yourself video editing software to make these videos. And so I just want to encourage everybody watching, like, everything is figure outable. If you are looking at something in your life, in your career, a project, don't say no necessarily just because you don't know how to do it. If you are willing to put in the time, you can figure it out. You can teach yourself how to do it. And so whether it's, for us building our website, but that was only one piece of the puzzle. When you launch a whole new company, there's so many things that are involved in that from so many different angles. So we've been spending a lot of this time in quarantine really digging into our brand. But anyway, and so pulling some pretty crazy hours for that. But even outside of that, whether it's something that entrepreneurs forget sometimes is that, you have these meetings, and it depends on the industry. But for service providers, I feel like you have a full day of meeting with clients or meeting with potential clients, and that's awesome. You still have to do the work. And so your day doesn't stop just because those meetings are done. And so then you have to put in the time and do that work. And so for me, that's doing the strategizing, doing the consulting, doing all of that kind of stuff, and then designing all of the things and all of that. And then you meet with the client to review it, and then you do it all over again. And then, for me, I have the added to it of the podcast and the YouTube channel. So for me, there is no 9 to 5 in my world. I have started to be more conscious of the need to put boundaries there. Because one of the things is too, like for most of us entrepreneurs, we get into entrepreneurship because we love what we do and we love serving people the way that we do, which is a wonderful thing. But something that I had to learn is that I can only serve others to the degree that I am serving myself first. And that includes setting boundaries. So I have been known to pull ridiculous hours, but I do not recommend that. And honestly, you don't do your best work that way. You burn out and you think that you're being productive because you've pulled an all-nighter to get all these things done, versus if you had set a boundary and taken a break or gone to bed or whatever, you would have returned to the project with much fresher thinking and it would have gotten done in less time.
So that can segue a little bit to my next question. If there's if there's someone who's thinking about getting into, let's start with maybe starting their own business. We'll start with the entrepreneur piece, but I'm going to kind of ask it about also the branding and marketing piece too. What sort of things can students get involved in while they're in high school, or even if they do decide to go to college? What sort of out of school or in school activities can they participate in that might help them out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I don't know for all the schools in the area. I do know that Binghamton High School has a phenomenal entrepreneurship track. And so I would encourage you to talk to your guidance counselor, find out about that, get involved in that. I mean, there are things that you can actually learn how to run a business and learn the financial aspect of what goes into it and what I need to be thinking about in this. And so you can learn about, because the thing about starting your own business is everybody's like, I'm going to start my own business and I'm going to do what I love and I'm going to make all this money and this is fabulous. There are all of these things that you don't know. I mean, maybe you do. Maybe your family has a history of entrepreneurship, in which case, awesome. You're so much further ahead than I was. But there's all these things that like nobody told me when I signed up for this. You have to do all of the bookkeeping. You have to know about all of this legal stuff. You have to know where to apply. You have to know about client management. You have to know about project management, depending on what you do. You might have inventory you have to deal with. You might have, things you need to do with the state. Like there's all these things to get involved. So I would say any kind of, I know Binghamton University has some awesome entrepreneurship courses as well. And so anything you can do to learn about entrepreneurship in school, definitely dig into. I would also highly, highly encourage you to dig into entrepreneurship outside of school, because this is going to be lifelong learning that stays with you forever. Like you never stop learning. I am involved in courses. I am reading books. I am doing all of these things, both for branding and for entrepreneurship. Like I fully believe in the power of lifelong learning. And so there's always something new to learn. There's always something that you can grow in. So definitely take advantage of any resources that are provided to you at school, but don't rely on the school to feed it all to you. Talk to entrepreneurs that you know. Follow entrepreneurs on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. Find out, our YouTube is a great one. Find out about the behind the scenes. The more that you can have people let you in behind the scenes, the better position you will be to launch your own company, because you'll have the advantage of learning from them what they wish somebody would have told them.
And what sort of skills do you think are important to be an entrepreneur?
Oh man, that's a great question. I think the very first skill that you need as an entrepreneur is determination. Mm-hmm. You have to have determination. If you are somebody who, when the going gets hard, you quit, this is probably not the life for you. Mm-hmm. This is the most exciting, terrifying, thrilling, hardest, wonderful ride I've ever been on in my entire life. And I've been on some crazy rides, as Danielle could tell you. So I would just encourage you, you have to have determination. You also have to have a hunger to grow. Mm-hmm. And that means not being locked into, like, this is what I love, so this is what I'm going to do, and that's it. Like, you have to be willing to grow in those skills, but you also have to be willing to grow as a person, mm-hmm. as well as a company. Like, this new company that I just launched is basically us growing to where our customers need to be now. So when I launched Artistry by Design, it was, I do this, I've done this for, I forget how long it was at that time. Now it's been over 13 years, but so whatever that would have been, I've done this for over 10 years. I love this. I can serve the people this way. This is awesome. I'm going to do this, which is great. But times change, and your customers are going to need you to show up for them in the way they need you now. And so this whole new company is us showing up fully as who we are. We could have done these things before, but it was more like, okay, this is what I'm comfortable with, if that makes sense. So I think another big thing is you have to be willing to push outside of your comfort zone because other people need you to.
Mm-hmm.
They need you to not shrink back. They need you to fully show up as who you are. So I know that's kind of a lot, but determination, being willing to grow. As far as practical skills, I would say soft skills are the most important.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't have genuine relationships with your clients, you don't have a business. It doesn't matter how good you are at what you do. It doesn't matter how much you love what you do. It doesn't matter how many books you've read. If you are not able to build real relationships with people, and I'm not just talking about relationships in terms of I got a sale.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about real relationships. If you're not able to build real relationships with people, you're not going to have a real business. You're just not. Because people don't do business with businesses. People do business with people. And if you have the soft skills to build real relationships with people, to listen to your customers, not just tell them what you think, to follow up, to care about what's going on in their lives, even beyond whatever you're working on. If you don't have those skills, you're not going to make it as an entrepreneur, or I should say you're not going to have the impact that you could have. But if you have those soft skills, if you know how to communicate, if you know how to listen, if you know how to, emotional intelligence is something I think that doesn't get talked about enough. If you know how to read somebody in a conversation, if you know how to respond rather than react, those are all things that may seem like, wait a minute, aren't we talking about business? Aren't we talking about branding? Like, those are some of the most valuable skills you can have for any career, any industry, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. In relation to like the marketing, branding, graphic design piece, anything additional that you want to add about skills or ways to explore it?
Yeah, I'm going to keep harping on this because it was my journey, right? Like when I started out my design journey, I did end up going back to school and getting my degree, but I started out self-taught. And so be a student. Be a student. When you're walking through the mall, with your friends and you stop staring at a logo, don't just say, hey, that's awesome. Analyze it. What is it that draws me to this? What is standing out to me about it? If you see somebody's YouTube channel that's crushing it, what is it about this that I love that's drawing me to it? If you see a t-shirt that you're like, I love that t-shirt. Like constantly be a student. Be a student of what you see that you're drawn to. Be a student of what you hear that you're drawn to. And then learn. Like, there are so many amazing avenues out there. Adobe has awesome tutorials. There's so many designers putting out amazing content on YouTube, tips and tricks and whatever, but also philosophy, behind it. So really learn everything that you can and always be learning and always be a student. That's my recommendation. Learn the software, learn the tools, learn the tricks, but go deeper than that. So many people think of design as like, okay, well, I have to be a good artist. Okay, that's only part of it. If you want to be a good artist, that's awesome, pursue that route. But graphic design is partnered with business. So you have to understand business and what makes graphic design successful in business, or you're not going to be a successful designer for your clients. You have to understand the power of communication through the design. It's not enough for it just to look cool or look pretty. If it's not communicating the message in the right tone, then it's going to flop for your client, and you don't want that. So, like, there's a lot more to it. Learn the software, learn the tools, learn the techniques, there's always hacks. You can always find a designer with a hack on YouTube that can help you do it more efficiently. But really be a student of much more than that. Be a student of what works and why it works, so that you can learn that, so that you can do that for clients, you can do that for the company that you work for, you can even do that for yourself.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for all the great advice and thoughts you gave us today. I'm excited to share the video with everybody. If anybody has any follow-up questions, my information will be listed right at the end of this video, and I can get you in touch with Rachel and get you any questions answered.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Danielle. I'm honored to be with you today. Can I talk about my podcast real quick?
Yeah.
And if you guys want to know a little bit more about branding and some of the things that I just said about why it's successful or why it isn't, or what business owners need to keep in mind when it comes to branding, you can check out my podcast, The Brand Boss Show, which is available on all the podcast platforms.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. And yeah, definitely check out Rachel's podcast. I know some of our chamber staff were on it one day too.
That's right.
All right. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me.